Thank you very much. Good afternoon, good evening, thought leaders, business leaders, and elected leaders of Great Falls. I am Liebert. I'm host of Voices and Views Me 2.0 on KGPR 89.9 FM, as well as a board member at Great Falls Rising, one of the co-hosts today. And I'm also vice chair of Citizens for Clean Energy, a group of concerned local citizens that banded together back in the 2000s in response to a very similar situation to last year's near miss with the data center being proposed just outside of town. Back then, it was a coal-fired power plant being proposed out in Highwood. And for the nearly 2 decades since that project got pulled, CCE has met a dedicated group of current and former scientists, educators, county planners, technologists, teachers, as the world has continued its rapid shift away from fossil fuels and towards renewables, the kind of energy that's cheaper to produce now and leaves a far lighter footprint on Montana's clean and healthful environment for future generations. CCE helps the statewide Montana Renewable Energy Association usher in Great Falls' first ever Clean Energy Fair right here on Central Avenue at the end of the summer, 2 blocks just outside of City Hall. MREA serves as a kind of trade association for solar panel installers like Bridger Renewables, who actually have an office right here at the Hot Hive if you're thinking about putting panels on your home. And for years since, we've sponsored cash prizes, CCE that is. We've sponsored cash prizes for student researchers tomorrow over at the Science Fair at MSU, College, or Great Falls College. But today, of course, it's not coal-fired power plants, it's data centers who are grabbing the headlines here and spurring our stalwart band, Citizens for Clean Energy, to action once a month to plan community events like this one. And last month, Ricky held a presentation over at the Methodist Church. Today's panel discussion with MEIC, Golden Triangle Resource Council, prize partners of ours, as well as Upper Missouri Waterkeepers and Great Falls Rising, each of which will be introduced by Karen in a moment. But for right now, I'd like to ask the incoming slate of Citizens for Clean Energy officers and steering team to stand so everyone can see who is leading the charge into 2026. If you have any interest in joining our stalwart little renegade band of energy educators and thought leaders, please. We have a very small number of flyers. We do not like to kill trees. So talk to one of those people that just stood up afterwards if you'd like to join us. Our annual kickoff meeting is in 6 days' time on the 14th. So we will be electing that slate, hopefully, and talking about our mission for 2026. So come join us on what I call Team Clean and Green. So basically, that's all I really have to say. And with that, I'd like to introduce tonight's moderator for the panel discussion you've all come here to check out, Golden Triangle Resource Council Board Chair, Karen Thornton.
Thank you, David. First of all, we were going to have a mic. We don't have one, so especially those in the back, if you cannot hear, put your hand up. I will see you, and we'll try to speak up. Housekeeping. Restrooms are down the hall to the left. There will not be an intermission, so make yourselves comfortable. If you need to go, go. There are some snacks back here. We understand it's dinner time, so if you didn't get yours yet, feel free to help yourself to some snacks. Those people that are in front of it might let you through. Sign-in sheets. If you haven't signed in, please do on your way out. That's a way for us to follow up with you because we will be sending you, if you gave us your email, we will be sending you some additional information. The white cards, like Ben already said, on the table are for you to write questions, and we will be circulating throughout. So if you have written a question on a card, please hold it up, and we'll come around and grab them from you. And if you need more cards, we can get you those too. We'll also be compiling the questions and forwarding them to some local and state officials so that they know what our concerns are and what your concerns are from this meeting. I think that's going to be very helpful as well. This session is being recorded and will be available on YouTube via the MEIC site tomorrow. Please share it with those who couldn't get here tonight. I think it's going to be a valuable resource. So any questions about housekeeping at this point? All right. So we are here tonight to learn more about data centers. Great Falls has already seen one proposal that's now on pause, and we have a window of opportunity to learn more and approach our legislators and guide conversations and regulations to protect our communities. We've gathered panelists tonight to give you information on a wide range of subjects relative to data centers, including how to get involved in the discussion and development. Some issues associated with data center development include water use, light pollution, water pollution, electricity use and rate increases, noise pollution, and sightline disruptions. But data centers also provide needed information for our computer age and may provide some local jobs and tax base if they are developed appropriately. Currently, there is very little oversight or zoning regulation relative to data centers. And again, please write down questions that you may have as we go along, and we will be taking questions after all of the panelists have spoken, okay? Our first panelist is well-known, Ann Hedges of the Montana Environmental Center. She is the executive director and began work at MEIC in 1993. She has worked toward a clean and healthful environment for present and future generations ever since. Her focus on air pollution, climate, energy, and the public's right to know and participate has resulted in numerous campaigns and legislative victories that have protected public health and natural resources for generations to come. Welcome, Ann.
This is fun. This is a great crowd. Thank you for being here tonight. I could speak for hours on this topic. I promise I won't. I am going to struggle to keep this in my time limit, but I will do my level best. If I say something that needs clarification, you can ask in the questions, or you're welcome to contact me after this meeting. And I think we are going to contact all of you who signed in, and we will give you a ton of information, more than you probably want, including all of our contact information. So thank you very much for being here. Very, very quickly, what is a data center? A data center is just a big building full of computers and fans to try to cool those computers down. Because especially in this era where we have chips that are, the NVIDIA chip, for example, they are so high-powered, they require a lot more electricity. And your data centers have to stay cool, or else your systems, your computers don't function. So you get hundreds, if not thousands, of computers in these rooms that have to be cooled. That cooling uses electricity, it uses water, and it causes noise, it causes vibration, because you have big fans on the top of buildings usually. And you know, that's what these things are. There are different scales, though, of the types of data centers that exist. We've had data centers around forever. Data centers are not something that's new, but this era in the last year, we have seen this enormous increase because of the chips, because of the ability to compute much faster, and AI taking advantage of that and moving us forward technologically. So we have this rush to build data centers, which are really just big buildings full of computers. That's a very technical term. But why do we care? Because ultimately, I assume everybody in here has a phone. You have computers. We all use data. And we should. I mean, data is one of the things that have really brought this country along. It has helped in the medical arena. It has helped in so many arenas in which we have thrived in this country. So data is important, and we need data centers. The question is, what are the impacts and how do we mitigate those impacts? That's where we're at. We are not saying no to data centers at MEIC. We are not. We are saying data centers should be coming to this state on our terms. They should be doing things to protect the existing customers of our utilities. They should be protecting farmers and ranchers and water users who are already here and have senior water rights. They should be protecting neighbors from the noise and from the vibrations and from the light. And they can do all of these things. They just won't unless they have to. And so what we're here tonight to talk about is what the potential harm is And what are some strategies that we can move forward on to actually mitigate the harm from this new rush to data centers and to protect Montanans from some outcomes that we're seeing all over the globe. We are not unique. Montana is not unique. Let's just start there. So ultimately, as this headline says, energy demand from data centers growing faster than the West can supply. That is absolutely true. We've never seen an increase in need like we are seeing right now for energy. Our energy system has been really quite flat for a very long time. People have gotten more efficient in their use of energy in their homes and their businesses. So we really haven't seen huge increases in demand for electricity until now. And I can tell you that there are a lot of utilities that are salivating over that increased demand because that equals money for them. That's fine. That's what they do. They are here to make wealth for their shareholders. But we should not be subsidizing that. And that's what we're going to talk about, is how we as existing customers we are expected to be subsidizing power costs for some of the richest companies in the world. And that is not okay. So about a year ago, the Harvard study came out. The Harvard study is the one you see up on the screen. It says, extracting profits from the public, how utility ratepayers are paying for big tech's power. And this was a game changer. This study really did outline how utilities are using existing customers to subsidize the cost of these data centers that utilities are providing power to. And this professor went through just example after example of different ways that these data centers they're being built and their electricity is being provided to them on the backs of the existing customers. And in other places in this nation, it's stunning how their electric bills have increased. If you see PJM's market, PJM is an area in the east, the northeast of this country, and it's a market. The watchdog, it's like their consumer council, calculated that 70%, or $9.3 billion of increased electricity costs over the past year was caused by data centers. I wanted to show you this graphic because I think it's really important if you can see it. I wish you could see it better. But this is a graphic of NorthWestern Energy's, no, I'm sorry, it's not. This is a graph nationwide of different categories of electricity users. So we have different categories. Every utility serves different categories of electricity users. Industrial users, like refineries. They have commercial users, data centers. And then they have residential and small business users. What you can see in this graph is starting from 1997 until about 2009. This just came out this week in the Yale Climate Connections. In 2009, so each customer class is pretty much paying the same rate. But then starting in 2008, there started to be a differentiation in who was paying. The blue line is residential customers. This is all over the country. This is an aggregate. And what we have seen, unfortunately, you're seeing...
Blue was residential?
Yes, blue is residential. So residential rates in the last few years have really skyrocketed compared to your commercial/data center customer class and industrials. I would argue it's because they have better lobbyists. They have better people before the utility commission. They're smarter. They're there. They know the system. They know how to work it. And then you have, your residential customer. We've got the consumer council in this state. I mean, one little entity that is supposed to take on every utility in the state to protect customers is insufficient in this era. And this is a great example. It's happening in every state across the country. Residential rates are going up. And data centers are part of the problem. Let's see if I can advance a slide. My technology skills are also...
You just use the arrow key in.
I'm trying.
Leave that around.
I got no arrow key.
No, I mean on your keyboard.
That's what I'm using.
First you have to desort that.
Oh, thank you. I'll just go right here. Okay. I need technology help. That's not my strength. So I just want to show you something that I think is important for Montana. Now, this is a Montana figure. And this is about residential electricity rates now without data centers. So since 2005, there's just too many Zoom things up here. Let's move those around.
There you go.
Yeah, so let's move this around too. Don't need me. Okay, since 2005, you can see till the present, the average customer demand for electricity in Montana has increased very little, 3.6%. But yet your rates have increased 87%. 87%. So if you think your electric bills are skyrocketing, they are. They have been. And I have a lot of reasons for that, but tonight we're just going to talk about data centers. We already are in a crunch in this state when it comes to electric bills. We have seen since in the last 20 years, especially the last decade, a tremendous increase in our cost of electricity. And we haven't been using more electricity on average per person. Okay. Still. Okay. Now this, another slide, NorthWestern's residential electricity customer rates have increased 39.4% just since 2022. Okay, almost 40%. This is all pre-data centers. So you can see on this line that between the rate, before, if you look at July 2024, when NorthWestern filed its last rate case, you have that line where the blue and the red intersect at the bottom in 2024 to today. That right there is a 12% increase in how much you are paying for electricity. So we already have an affordability crisis in this state. And so what happens when we bring in all these data centers? So this is a graph that we created that shows Montana's existing customers of NorthWestern Energy use 760 average megawatts of power. That's how much they use. 750. That's that red square. On the bottom, you're going to see all of the data centers that have been proposed in the last year and a couple months. That's a lot. So we have to provide, NorthWestern thinks it has to provide power to all those people, all those data centers. What will that do? It will cause us to have to build a whole lot more power plants, build a whole lot more transmission and distribution. That is a staggering amount of electricity for a state our size. And the question becomes, who is going to pay? Because these data centers, they don't make money by paying their fair share. That's just not what happens. So all of these data centers want somebody else to help fund their power. And we are seeing that all over the nation. You are seeing, like Duke Energy, only because of court filings did we find out that Duke Energy was planning for customers to subsidize $325 million of costs for data centers in Duke's service territory. $25 million. It was in litigation that they got to that point that, oh, wait, existing customers are going to be paying for all these new power plants and infrastructure that they don't need. We're only building those things for the data centers. Data centers can afford to build them themselves. But the problem is the whole data center thing is a bit of a bubble. So up here you're seeing some really, ahead of IBM, saying there is no way that these hyperscalers, those are very large data centers, like Google and Amazon will be able to turn a profit at the rate of their data center development and their spending. It's the frothiest bubble, according to the Wall Street Journal. China's AI craze, they hit there before we did. They have a lot of empty buildings, They built all this, they assumed they would come, and nobody came. So we don't want, as existing customers of our utility, we don't want them to say, we've got to build more for these things when these things aren't sticking around. If they ever get built at all, if this data center actually does come, and you just learned, data centers come and go, it's a race to the bottom. They are shopping around amongst all the states, they're trying to find the best deals, and they're going to locate it in the place that gives them the cheapest energy and the lowest taxes, and they have their own criteria, whatever they are, but they are telling everybody, hey, we want to locate here, we want to locate here. And they are doing a race to the bottom, but your utilities are using those numbers to say, oh, we're seeing this enormous, 100% increase in demand in the next couple of years. Seriously, by 2030, you should see the numbers on what the projections are for potential data centers across this country. It's staggering, and as you can see on that previous slide, we're seeing it in Montana. We are not immune to that hype, but it could very well be hype. None of this may ever come to pass. And then we will be stuck still having to pay for the infrastructure if we build it, and they are not required to pay their fair share. Because our demand has been pretty flat. We really don't need more. Okay. Technology is not my strength. It just doesn't. I'm at 15. Okay, I'm going to go really, really fast. I'll skip that one. Sorry. What should Montanans do? We have a public service commission that is in charge of this issue. We went to the Public Service Commission a couple months ago with a whole bunch of organizations to say, you need to regulate data centers as an individual rate class. We need to take all of their costs and we need to assign them to data centers, not to the rest of us. We shouldn't have to subsidize these guys. The Public Service Commission has not responded to our request in November. We are still waiting. The Public Service Commission has the authority and the obligation to protect us as existing customers from data centers coming into NorthWestern service territory. This is what NorthWestern just provided to the PSC. These are the contracts that NorthWestern has with data centers. And about the only thing that isn't redacted in there is saying that these are privileged documents.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, this is what it looks like. Okay, we need transparency. We need to know what's going on. We need to know what's being proposed. We need to know how much energy is being used. And the legislature has done nothing except give them tax breaks. Starting in 2017, the legislature lowered their property tax rate for data centers to 0.9%. This last session, despite a whole slew of bills asking for a number of things, one of them is just reporting their annual electricity use, which failed. Another one was a study resolution, which failed. Only thing that passed was expanding that tax break to all the infrastructure and generation associated with that data center. So the legislature has done nothing but try to encourage data centers here without any sideboards, no mitigation whatsoever. So I'm not going to talk about this, but I am going to tell you that these data centers are going to extend the life of the Colstrip power plant, which is one of the dirtiest plants in America. It has the highest toxic rate of emissions in the United States. We can do better than keep this plant open for data centers. I'm going to turn it over to Ken, though, who is going to talk about Colstrip, because he actually built it.
So Ken is a member of CCE and GRTC, and he was born and raised in Great Falls. He started as an apprenticeship in 1975 as a boilermaker on Colstrip 1 and 2, and worked on and off at Colstrip until 1983. During that time, he attended MSU, where he received a degree in mechanical engineering technology. He served in the Peace Corps from 84 to 86, working as a renewable energy engineer. He returned to Great Falls and has spent his life developing and building wind and solar-powered homes. He also is a founding member of Citizens for Clean Energy and helped stop the proposed Highwood coal plant near Great Falls. Ken?
I guess the point I'll start off with, when I look at these data centers, I don't know much. I think that's why we're all here. We've got to learn. But I see it as a tool, and it could be a great tool that would do a lot of good. I used it to prepare this presentation a lot, talking to Mr. Google all the time. But the point is, I actually thought that maybe it's a good idea to build that big data center here, but it'd have to be built sustainably. You'd have to put up its own wind farm and solar farm and batteries, totally connected. You'd have to make the cooling system as sustainable as you could. So, and the idea, what we're looking at now is Montana Power, that's how old I am. NorthWestern, with these power plants, they want to use those to power these data centers. It took 10 years to build Colstrip 1, 2, 3, and 4. You could put up that 2.2 gigawatts of energy in less than 1 to 2 years if you use solar, wind, and battery backup. That's where the technology is right now. This is Colstrip. I'm intimate with that structures. The point is, what NorthWestern's trying to do, they're trying to sell us this old junker. And as you can see, Colstrip plants are 40 to 45 years old. The average life expectancy of a coal plant is 29 years. So, you do the math. One thing on the side I'd like to see, if you look at this white here, this is steam off the cooling towers. Colstrip 1 and 3 and 4 use over 14 million gallons of water a day. They evaporate it. That's how they cool down. Part of doing a coal-fired power plant, you have to cool it down. You heat the coal way up, heat the water, and then you cool it down real fast, and that causes the power. So Great Falls, I think we use like 11 million gallons a day. There's 2 great big pipes that go into Colstrip that do that from the Yellowstone River. Okay, I want to teach a little about how these plants work and show why they're not dependable, like NorthWestern keeps trying to tell us. This is how a pulverized coal-fired power plant works. They pulverize the coal, mix it with air, blow it into the cavity here, the furnace, light it on fire, and then the heat goes up and heats all the water in the components. This is kind of like what it looks. It's 3-dimensional. It's just a big container. And I put lines on this white side to show that it's made out of tubes. Every bit of this is tubes. They're 2 to 3 inch tubes just like this. On the walls, they're called water walls, tube walls. And then inside the boiler, you have these hanging units. I don't know if you can see this. I drew it. It's like pipes hanging down in a U. And this whole area up here, it's not just these few, it's full of these tubes. Hundreds of panels of these hanging down. These are the superheaters. So what the water does, it gets heated in the tubes and it goes to different units. It gets hotter and hotter until it gets up to about 1,100 degrees Fahrenheit. It's from 2,000 to 3,000 pounds of pressure. But the point I want to make that you understand is it's all tubes. It's all this. If you took all the tubes and put them end to end, each boiler would be over 200 miles. So it would reach from Great Falls to Billings. And that's what makes these tubes. And the pressure in these is 2,000 to 3,000 pounds a square inch. And it's the water or the steam in it is running at 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. And the point why these things aren't reliable is if you get a pinhole, if you get a leak in one of these tubes, in that 200 miles of tubes, you got to shut the boiler down. It takes about a week to cool it down, go in, patch the tube, and then turn it back on. Now, the idea about unreliability is the fact that they're 40 years old. And the point is that these tubes elongate, the chemical structure gets old, so it gets weaker. And then you have, they call it Montana coal. They keep saying it's clean coal. What it is, it's low sulfur coal. Because it's low sulfur, back in the 70s we were concerned about acid rain. So we have scrubbers on here that take out all the sulfur. So we don't have the acid rain problem. But the coal isn't clean. It's actually a pretty dirty coal. And so it has fly ash, goes up with the hot gases, and that's like sand. And that sand blasts these tubes. So at 40 years, they're a whole lot thinner than when I put them in. 40 years ago. And the other show and tell I have is myself. I was 20 years old when I started building these things. I'm 70 years old now. Am I your most reliable worker? No. I'm retired. Just like these should be too. Okay. And this is the point, this scares me the most, any engineer. This shows the destructive forces. This is the phase, probably the first 10 years. This one, you're going to maybe this is 40 years here. And this is how the destructive forces increase. That's where we are. Well, the first thing I'll say, what you do with these plants. You know, like I say, that window of life is from like 25 years to 40 years. So in there, the engineers look every year and say, well, do we keep this thing going or do we rebuild it? And just like an old car that has 200,000 miles on it, if you want to keep it going, you usually rebuild the engine, rebuild the transmission. With these things, you rebuild all those superheater tubes. I was looking up nowadays that for these plants, each of them, it'd be anywhere from $300 million to $1.2 billion to bring these up to the point where they could take them up to 50 years or 60 years. So that, for that same amount of money, if we look at what they could buy for solar, this shows you the price of solar, utility scale solar and wind compared to coal. Coal's the same. It's cheap. They could build the same amount of power out of solar and wind for what it would cost them to keep this old plants going for a couple of years. I don't think they've rebuilt any of this stuff. Do you know of any? They put tubes
it needs a new superheater, and that's been a debate among the owners, and we're about to have to pay for it.
Yeah, and they said $80 million, and I don't think that's a reasonable amount. So, and I am really, as someone who's worked in solar and wind for most of my life, it's an incredible time. And the main thing right now is the batteries. In 2010, a kilowatt hour battery cost you $2,500. Currently, it's $100. So it is the cheapest power. Wind, solar, and batteries are the cheapest power. And this is one of the most beautiful graphs in the world. This shows the price of the battery storage coming down, and this shows what the world is doing. This is 2024. It's 169 gigawatt hours of storage. Actually, 2025, it's 240, and we're proposing, I can't even reach that far. It's the same step for the next 2 years and probably on. This is the future. And it's not because it's environmental, why I would do it. It's because it's the economical path to take. And all these data centers should have their own solar and wind and battery. Hopefully most of them will. That's the way to go.
So our next panelist is Guy Alzentser. He's from Upper Missouri Waterkeeper. Guy is the executive director, and since 2013, Waterkeeper has been a watchdog protecting fishable, swimmable, drinkable water across the 25,000 square miles of Montana's Upper Missouri River Basin, from the Centennials and Red Rock to Cascade and Great Falls. Guy is a practicing attorney who specializes in land use and water resources with specialties in state and federal environmental law, and who has engaged in several issues critical to Cascade County, such as the ill-conceived Madison Food Park Slaughterhouse and enforcing nutrient standards for river protection. Guy?
Hi. Good evening. All right, let's see if I can get this to work. Okay, it's going to work. Hello, my name is Guy. I work for Upper Missouri Waterkeeper. If you haven't heard of us, we're a not-for-profit that specializes in water. We believe that if you don't have fishable, swimmable, drinkable water, we're pretty much screwed. The good news is there are rules under state and federal law that protect your rights to that, but rules are only as good as their enforcement. So why are we here and talking about data centers? We're here because water is an inextricable part of what makes a data center possible. So, I want to talk today about some somewhat esoteric but also pretty practical outcomes of what's going to happen when we're talking about data centers. And I want to talk about it through the lens of water supply, which is to say, how is water used by these facilities? I want to talk about what happens with the water when it's used in terms of pollution and water quality impacts. And then I want to give you just a nutshell of the day-to-day lawyer nonsense without your eyes glazing over. So bear with me and we'll get through it together. So here's your down and dirty. We've already had some speakers tonight talk about how do data centers use water. This is the way in which I think of it at its most basic. We're talking about the direct, the indirect, and the cumulative, right? And I'm not big on repeating everything here, so I'm going to give you some slides, and then I'm going to get to use my handy-dandy note cards. This is the basic trade-off, right? We got to figure out ways in which to cool these things down, and they're either going to have to do evaporative cooling or air cooling, and there's big trade-offs in terms of the energy cost associated with those. A lot of what we're seeing right now is that it's not necessarily energy intensive if you're doing particular cooling, but it requires a lot of water. So why is that important? Well, I want to be very clear about this statement. Data centers are introducing a fundamentally new water-intensive industrial use into our communities when we are already tapped out with water. We do not have enough to go around. If you are from a ranching background, if you are an angler, if you are somebody that pays a utility bill or even has your own property in the county and you want to turn on your faucet reliably, you should be very concerned about where these big new industrial centers that are largely automated are going to get their water from. This is a very poorly regulated field in Montana, and we do not have good rules in the books today to make sure that we understand what is the scope of the consumptive water use from these facilities and whom, including local communities, who's going to pay that bill. How do we make sure it works up front? Put it another way, how do we make sure it's going to be a pay-it-forward proposition that doesn't necessarily harm local water users of all stripes before these things get to break ground? So here's a graph. You can read this. What this is meant to say is, Anne, I think, spoke to this best, and I'll paraphrase. We are now seeing a particular type of data center. We are seeing the big boys. The big boys are coming in. Why? Because when you have the hedge fund, tech bros from out of state and often international come in, we are cheap to build in Montana, right? It's cheaper to build here than in the Puget Sound or in the Northeast. But also, our water is comparatively cheap, and we don't have a regulatory framework that's going to be prohibitive in terms of their ability to get their hands on our water before it's already a done deal. So they want to build here, and they want to build big because they can get bang for their buck here. We're essentially the inverse, right? It's a really good proposition to try to build here from a water resource perspective, whereas we right now are going to have to shoulder that burden. Second big point I want to make today. The true water footprint is way beyond just cooling, right? When we talk about water and using water, it's not just about is it going to get sucked out of the aquifer, right? These are cumulative impact problems. And when I say cumulative impact, you can think of it from the perspective of we have a finite amount at a certain time. And if you start putting too many straws in the cup, what's going to happen? You're going to have the cones of depression, right? And when we talk about the scale that's being suggested for these hyperscale facilities, we're talking about an enormous sucking sound, and they can only get it from so many places. They're either going to have to go to the Missouri if they're going to try to bring back Project Falcon, what an auspicious name. We're either going to go to the Missouri and try to do that, or they're going to try to go to something like maybe the underlying Madison Aquifer or even Giant Springs. All of those could be bad news bears. And I think one of the most disastrous things, and I have to put on my old farm boy hat, I grew up on a sheep farm, when you start messing with where I'm going to get my spring-fed irrigation water from, if I can't turn on the faucet for my animals, we're done. And by the way, we're supposed to have a system of rules on the books that protect those that have existing rights, that protects our municipal supplies, that protects the landowner who bought their dream home in the county, and yet now it could potentially run dry because they have this big facility a mile or two away. These are the types of questions that are far beyond just this idea of sucking it up and cooling it off. It is not a benign industrial process. It will have a rippling effect. literally and proverbially, into our communities, into our landscape, and from an ecological perspective, into our waterways and our groundwater. Let's remember, most Montanans get their water resource supplies, particularly public, from our groundwater. And yet that groundwater is inextricably tied to our rivers and streams, right? But we don't have good rules in the books looking at this type of use yet. Okay, what's the third point I want to make? Pollution, evaporative loss. I want to talk about wildlife. My organization largely works on this idea of fishable, swimmable, drinkable. That comes from our state constitutional rights to a clean, healthful environment. It comes from federal law. It's been on the books for 50 years. You have a right to make sure our waterways are fishable, swimmable, and drinkable. Sounds like a common sense proposition, but how do you make good on that? Well, when we're talking about data centers, one of the big costs from water is not just about how much they're going to consume. It's going to be put through their filters. It's going to cool it down. There's going to be all kinds of unknown contaminants, right? We just learned in the last, year that the city of Kalispell had to shut down drinking water supplies because PFAS contamination was exponentially exceeding drinking water standards. We don't even have a registry of where the problems exist with existing contaminants. And yet, if these data centers come in and they're using these water, what are they doing? They're cooling off their facility, they're evaporating it, it's concentrating pollutants, and what are they going to do with that water? They have to get rid of it somewhere. They're going to try to inject it back into your groundwater that you use for your public drinking water supplies. They're going to try to get discharge permits and put it into large volume rivers that the solution to pollution is dilution. And we don't even know how many pollutants are used in these facilities. Why? Think back to Ann's slide about what is happening with the Epstein files. With the NorthWestern files. It's all redacted. It's all proprietary. And there's a problem there, right? We in Montana should not have to suffer from this new industrial use when we don't even know the types of pollutants that are going to be in the wastewater. And we also know what the scale of this wastewater is going to be, but we don't know what the impacts are going to be because we don't even know what the heck is in it. So from, again, a qualitative perspective, we need to know what is in this stuff and where they're going to put it. And right now, there's no plan for it. And I'll tell you right now, as one who unfortunately has to litigate in state and federal court against our agencies, they are not here to put that burden on the industry. They are here to make sure those folks can get a permit as quickly and easily as possible. That is a fundamental problem and disconnect in Montana, and it will disadvantage you. That's not a political question. I want to be very clear. Our agencies are trying to serve the permitted polluters, and that is a big problem when we're talking about an industry where every other example in our country is telling us it's going to use your water, it's going to pollute your water, and they don't have a plan to do it safely. So let's also talk about why our frameworks, right, our rules, why aren't they really going to be on top of this? This is a bunch of the rules that, just off the top of my head yesterday, I could think of that should apply to this. And yet a big problem that we have is we don't even have this as a defined industrial sector use. Ironically, there's a defined tax code for it, but there is not a defined fabric and regulatory backdrop to say when it comes to using your water at that industrial scale. You heard tonight from our favorite engineer, Colstrip is consuming over 10 million gallons per day easily. And that's at an old 1970s tech. We're talking about facilities that just one of the scale of Project Falcon would be at least 5 million gallons per day. And we're talking about siting that right next to the public drinking water supply for the city of Great Falls. We're talking about also 5 million gallons a day of effluent having to go back out. Where is it going to happen? Let me be very clear. If you don't have standardized industrial codes, if you don't have a tapestry of rules that know what they're putting back out into environment and how we're going to stop that harm before it occurs, we're not going to be able to prevent the harm. And that's a big problem. Not just because as an esoteric matter you have a right to a clean and healthful environment, to be free from the harm in the first place, but because if we don't actually have standards and metrics to judge these facilities, we will in fact be the guinea pigs. And we should not be the guinea pigs for where our water goes and how it's polluted, and then we have to clean it up. We've already seen that story. We've seen that story across Montana and across the American West, and Americans, particularly Montanans, should not be the guinea pigs having to bear that fruit. So, let's also talk at the end, why is Montana being targeted? Why? We have cheap power. We have relatively cheap land. We have next to nothing in terms of disclosure requirements. And we have next to nothing in terms of a water oversight. Our water permitting program, which is to say water use, does not account for data centers as a particular type of use. There are existing loopholes for both thermal pollution discharge permits for pollution, as well as loopholes in terms of exemptions that they could use for industrial consumptive use. There could be all kinds of other loopholes that I can imagine where they would also say it's not even a consumptive use because we're going to get it back into the aquifer within 24 hours, which just begs the question, well, what else is going to be put back into my drinking water supply? This is just a taste, pun intended, of what is on tap, pun intended. What we're really facing here is far more questions than answers. And when we think of it purely from a water resource perspective, it bodes poorly for your ability to have safe drinking water. It bodes poorly for your ability to have a secure water supply for municipalities or existing senior water rights. It bodes poorly for our legacy agricultural users, and it bodes poorly for our outdoors heritage and wildlife. When we externalize the costs of new industrial users, who bears the cost of that first? It's the neighboring communities, it's the neighboring homes, it's our rivers and our wildlife. And it's unfair and it's unjust that we would shoulder those costs and push them out. And it's not just an economic cost, it's an ecological cost, and it's a human health cost. So, what does that mean for me? I think we need to be thinking proactively about what we can do. And when it comes to water, there's a lot of different things we can do. I'm not going to recite all these. You can read them on your own. But the basic point is we need to, as Ann said, demand transparency. We need to understand the actual water resource impacts qualitatively and quantitatively from these data centers. And we need to be empowering in a co-evolve status, not just our state legislators to do things that are responsive to us, the people, but we need to empower local control and oversight over this through both our zoning and our special use permitting. I don't think I need to remind anybody here about the quagmire that this particular community faced from the Madison Food Park Slaughterhouse based upon essentially special use permits getting issued and rubber stamped before the public was even made informed about what the heck was happening. And you had 7 years of a special use permit with some boondoggle that was going to pollute the community lingering. We don't need to go down that path for another industrial use, certainly not data centers, particularly where, as here, we already know the water resource impacts are going to be potent, they're going to be far-reaching, and they're largely going to be negative. So, in closing, if you don't know about water yet, and you want to know more about water, consider signing up for all the mailing lists, and certainly know what Waterkeeper's doing. We're your bird dogs. We're going to stay on top of it and try to do what we can. Thank you.
So make sure you're writing down questions, and if you have them, hold them up. We'll pick them up. Our last panelist is Richard Liebert of CCE. Richard is a cattle rancher, a Purdue graduate, and a retired Army Lieutenant Colonel. Thank you for your service. 40 years of active reserve service. He has been the president of Citizens for Clean Energy since 2006. He is on the Cascade County Planning Board. He is the past president of Montana Cattlemen's Association. He is a founding member of the Montana Veterans Memorial in Great Falls. He's also president of KGPR, Great Falls Public Radio Association, and is serving in that role from 2018 to present. Richard?
I'm not going to kill you with PowerPoint. I'm going to talk directly about water, science fiction, Montana Power Company, and those topics. But I can tell you today, what? Stand in the middle, please. What's that? Stand in the middle so we can see it. I'll stand over here.
You can stand over there and do your own slides.
All right, I'll do what I'm told. I'm an old colonel. Okay. Yes, sir. Okay. All right, I'll tell you about water. I'm a cattle rancher. I haul water every day. I live out in Eden. I live 3 miles from the Smith River. I've seen the Smith River go dry twice, in 1999 and 2000. If that doesn't wake you up, I don't know what else will. But that is serious. So right now, look at the weather outside. It's going to be in the 50s next week. That is shocking to a cattle rancher. And it might be nice for everybody else, but if I don't get snowpack, I don't get my reservoirs filled, the creek's not running, I may have to sell out my herd this summer. I've been doing this since 1990. when I came off active duty and then went to ranching on the family farm. But that is serious. And another issue about power and transmission and things like that, and I know a lot of folks here, if you're in the farm and ranch community, imagine if we didn't have an interstate system like we have now. We would have no farm-to-market system. Right now, we don't have a power transmission system to send the power, even if we built all these plants. And I know Ken too would know about that, Ken, and those things. And I'm really impressed. I got to say this, I'm impressed by the audience here. We have legislators, candidates, people in civics here, neighborhood council people, Eric Gray, Kathy Gessman, all kinds of people who worked fighting the Madison Food Park. And as an agriculture person, I can appreciate what the food park was trying to do, but even Montana Cattlemen's Association, we were questioning some of that a long time ago. But I am really impressed by the turnout here, whether you're pro, con, indifferent, but the point is, when you leave here, you should do something. And I brought the Constitution here. This is the Constitution of the state of Montana. You can get this for free from the Secretary of State. Call them. And there's 2 phone numbers I want to read now, because they're very important, and I'll say it again when I conclude. 444-6199. 444-6199. That is the Public Service Commission. They have the primary duty of watching over us to see what these data centers are going to do. Also, the governor's office, 444-3111. You can Google those things because we have this marvelous device, right? We all have this. If it wasn't for AI, we wouldn't have this, right? AI is here to stay. It's not science fiction. Now, here's a rhetorical question. If AI is so smart, how come it can't figure out how to power itself without harming humanity? Okay, I'm going to go a little more science fiction if you give me some latitude. All right, the next thing. How many of you have ever seen a movie called The Matrix? Raise your hand. I'm different generations. Okay, lower your hand. Okay, how many have seen the Terminator? I'll be back. You've seen those? That came out in the 80s and 90s and so forth. Okay, let's go back a little further. Remember Space Odyssey 2001? 1968? Okay, I'm crossing generations here. Remember HAL? Okay, and if I was Dave, what was I doing to HAL?
Shutting it down.
Dave, stop what you're doing. Dave, stop that. Why are you taking me apart? Because HAL became anti-human, and he killed the life support systems for the crew. Another guy just left outer space, and Dave had to sneak into the ship and take things over. But that was 1968, and Terminator came out before we even had the internet. So think about that. So those are the things that were going on then. But AI is here to stay. We don't want to give these up. We have to have these. For advancing technology, we have to compete. Even in the world of the military, you've heard all about Ukraine, drones, and everything else. Now, if you go to the Matrix, is that a grim story about humanity and technology? It's not a happy story. But why are we taken into it? How about the Terminator? Is that a happy story? But what attracts us to Arnold Schwarzenegger? The machine, and then the kid kind of gets him to be more human. And let's go back to an even better show. Remember Star Trek? The original one, Spock? Why was everybody intrigued with Spock? Because Spock was half Vulcan, half human, and tried to make him human. And Terminator would try to make him human and come around and see how it's better to be a human. And I remember Dr. McCoy and Kirk and Spock are all in the ship there, and I think Dr. McCoy, you remember Dr. McCoy, he's always pushing on Spock. He says, why do you like computers so much? I didn't say I love computers, it's just more efficient, And if we put your engrams on the computer would probably blow up, Dr. McCoy. Because guess what? Even with all the intelligence out there, we still have to build it. It's still humans are building these machines and using these machines. Now, where is that? Give me that. Okay. One more thing about science fiction. If you look at the grim part of the Matrix, what are humans in the Matrix?
Batteries.
One of these. A battery. That takes it to the far end. Now, we're not going there, but That's why we have to stay up with this stuff. And it's hard when we have a legislature that only meets every 2 years to try to catch up with technology. Because business, corporations, everything's moving 24/7. The weather doesn't stop 24/7, so we have to stay after it. Now, let me come back to reality here. Let's come back to Great Falls. Let's talk about what happened in the late 90s with deregulation and power. Do you remember those days? Who had Montana Power Company for power? Many people here. You didn't have NorthWestern Energy. And how many of your friends and families worked for Montana Power Company? I know Larry Steinbeck. How many had investments with Montana Power Company?
All the teachers.
And what happened to all that?
They lost it.
Anybody ever had Touch America? Bob Gannon's wonderful telecommunications investment. It lasted about a year. It was the worst telephone service I ever had. And Bob Gannon's living up in Flathead Lake, has a nice retirement, a nice place up there. But what happened to everybody's investments and jobs and pensions? What happened? Gone. Right. And Great Falls already had a kick in the gut in the 80s. What happened then? The smelter, right?
Yeah.
That came down. That was Butte and Great Falls. That came down. Montana Power Company was started in 1912 by a guy named Ryan, right, Ken? 1912. So smelter, Montana. That was all the institutions. Do we need another gut punch in Great Falls?
No.
And that's why we fought the coal plant so hard, and I'll get into that. But what year is this now? This is the 250th anniversary of the United States of America. And a group of patriots, they got together to organize. And when you are fighting a battle, you want to promote something, there's three things you got to do. You got to organize, strategize, and energize. All those three things, whether it's Citizens for Clean Energy, you're forming a group that's going to deal with the Madison Food Park, or you want to know more about data centers, or you want to create a group that's going to advocate for something at the next legislature. Organize, strategize, and energize. Now, organization, when you start an organization, I'll tell you where CC started. Cheryl Reichert and Charles Bocock, anybody know them?
Yes.
2004. That was an initial impression because I'll go back in time now. In the late 90s, deregulation came and both parties in the legislature were guilty of making this happen. Democrats, Republicans, and Mark Roscoe was the governor then. I like Mark Roscoe, but they all thought deregulation was wonderful. Anybody ever heard of Enron? Yeah, Enron, like 2002. And I remember sitting on the ranch. I had electric water heaters warming up all my water tanks for cattle. I remember within 2 years, those rates doubled. Didn't have Montana Power Company anymore because that eventually transitioned into what? NorthWestern Energy by 2003. So, and by that time, I think NorthWestern Energy went into bankruptcy in 2003, and that got John Lawton and other people in the city leadership angry why NorthWestern Energy went bankrupt. And then that led to getting invested in a power plant. What was that called? The Highwood Generating Station. And that started around 2004. Another thing that happened in 2005, the city and county planning board split. There used to be a great guy named Bob Horn. He ran it all, but the city and county decided to split. And the county wanted to go off on its own with the coal plant out on Salem Road, like 16 miles east of town. You know where that is?
Yeah.
Okay, way out there. So that's some of the timelines there. And when CC first organized, we, and Mike Yank was one of our first founders, and Ken Thornton, we were like a special forces. We had Stuart Lewin, attorney. Mike was a fish biologist, right? Engineer who helped build the thing, cold strip, and other people with different disciplines. Kathy Gessman, chemical engineer with her husband Ron. And by the way, in 2010, Citizens for Clean Energy, Ron and Kathy, they stopped a coal to liquid plant in the Missouri Room in the Civic Center. The Air Force was coming here, and even Brian Schweitzer was supporting it. Oh, it's coal to liquid. Bring all this coal to make fuel. That is one of the dirtiest ways to make fuel in South Africa, apartheid and everything else. Right, Kathy? And we said, this isn't going to happen, because if you thought the Highwood Generating Station, bringing all the coal cars in, would be bad enough, that would be even worse. and polluting everything. So, and in those days when we were organizing, we didn't have social media. We didn't have all that technology here. We had posters. We had people meeting. We had to meet here and there. We met at the Park and Ponder when we first started. And we had to get organized, and we had to fight the city for public records. And I think with the Madison Food Park controversy, that pushed the county into putting all the staff reports, all the information you needed on the website. And that's very important to have. Transparency, you've got to have that. And I'm proud to say the legislature does that. The legislature does very good with Zoom meetings and posting data and so forth. And who's watching out for us when it comes to these data centers in Helena?
Nobody.
Who's watching out for us?
Nobody.
Well, it should, yeah. We have to demand action, all of us, whether you're pro, con. I want to make this better. I want these things to be done right. The Public Service Commission, they should be the lead. And I think, maybe you can correct me, in 2008 they created a law that the PSC had to keep watch on this, about deregulation? Or?
Yeah, and the PSC is obligated, the law says the PSC, has to allow NorthWestern to serve large loads. And NorthWestern tried for about 9 months to get around that. It went to the legislature. It tried to change that law during the legislative session to eliminate the Public Service Commission oversight for data centers. They had 2 bills. Both died. So the legislature did do some good things. And NorthWestern continued to ignore going to the Public Service Commission. And the Public Service Commission actually stood up to NorthWestern this fall and said, no. You really do need to come to us and ask permission and prove that you're not going to harm existing customers. Now, we still haven't seen NorthWestern do that. They still haven't filed their application to the Public Service Commission. We're still waiting. But yes, the legislature has required NorthWestern to come forward. So that's an avenue for public engagement.
And that's where pressure from citizens got those laws changed. After the collapse of Montana Power Company, we said, we got to do better than this. So that's why we have a PSC. Randy Pinochi represents this district. Call him up, 444-6199. Because I know the numbers burn in my brain. And I called the governor's office today, 444-3111. And I said, give me the number for the governor's energy task force. And what are they tasked to do? They're supposed to be watching out how much generation we're going to have, how we're using the energy. And it leans a lot toward the data center. Now, nothing against the governor. He comes from a technology background, so I think he kind of embraces that. But we've got to be careful where that's going. And Sonia Nowakowski, and I know some of you know her out there, right, Ken? Sonia, and you know her. She used to be a legislative assistant. She now runs the DEQ. And the DEQ is responsible for our water quality. DNRC is responsible for our water rights. As a cattle rancher, I'm very keen on that. And as you've already heard, we only have a finite amount of water. When we don't have snowpack, we don't have those things, that is very serious for agriculture. So when you organize a team, leadership is about motivating people to effectively solve problems, work as a team, and communicate. And problem solving comes down to 3 things. I think all of us have to deal with it. Do you have enough time? Do you have enough money or resources? And do you have enough people? I think any group you work with, the Rotary Club, any civic group, you're time, money, and people. And when you want to organize and promote something, not just fight something, because people say, CC, you're just, I guess, a coal plant. No, in 2009, we also figured out the problem is fighting how to stop a coal plant. The other problem is how do you encourage people to embrace new ideas like clean energy? Well, we supported the science fairs in 2009. We've done them all the way through COVID and everything else, provide cash awards and try to promote people, and promote our young generation. I don't know what the people back in 2013 or 14 are doing now. Hopefully they got a master's degree, they got families going. But that's another generation. It's been a long time. 2006, Jerry, it was just like yesterday almost. But that's what we got to do. As patriots, this is the 250th year of our founding of our nation. And we have a right to participate. We have a right to have independence, a right to make a constitution. And so, if you're pro-con, indifferent, don't know what you're going to do yet, I got to say, if any group, Teddy Roosevelt said, the best course of action is to make the perfect decision. The second best course of action is to make a less than perfect decision. And if I take that to the legislature, they have only so much time. Every other year they're trying to do things, but we have to help them bring these ideas and bring these to committees and bills and so forth. The very worst thing you can do, Teddy Roosevelt said, is make no decision. So we have to make some kind of decision. And the last thing that I'll say, Edmund Burke was a philosopher during the Revolutionary War. He was an English statesman. He said, the greatest tragedy is for somebody to do nothing because they thought they could only do a little. Whether you leave here, you make a phone call, whether you want to come and join CCE next Wednesday and be part of our team and carry on. If you want to donate your time, talent, and treasure, join a group, join Golden Triangle Resource Council, join MEIC. Run for the legislature. Do something. Act when you leave here. So everybody here, well, I'll do this, I'll do that. Maybe I'll read some more about this. Maybe I'll go on. Maybe I'll use AI and learn more about data centers. So that's the way to use that as a tool. So I'm just saying, we can say, fine speeches and PowerPoint and everything else, but the key thing is that when you leave here, I'm an old soldier, we say, let's march, get it done. Thank you.